For a couple of years, I was just kind of, the idea was kind of bouncing around in my head of would it be possible to kind of initiate this journey of putting together a big epic Viking movie with an old Icelandic saga at the core. I didn't know which one. There's so many of them, and I didn't really have a starting point. I didn't know where to how to kind of attack it, but I kind of knew that I wanted the combination of the old sagas are often about a family feud. It's about revenge. They're quite contained, and I thought it'd be incredible if you can combine that, but to do that on an epic scale. So you'd both have big battle scenes, but also at the core of it is this quite intimate story. We wanted to look as real and truthful as possible. And when it turned out that he was incredibly passionate about Norse mythology and the Viking culture, it felt like the obvious choice or a dream choice for us. So after that meeting, I spoke to Lars, and we both agreed that Rob would be the perfect director for this project. So we asked him, and to our great delight, he said that he wanted to jump on board. And so that was kind of the genesis of this collaboration between the three of us. It's character-driven. That was important, that it wasn't, you want it to be visually overwhelming and a lot and spectacular, but you need to care about these characters and follow them and feel for them and have these intimate moments between them, which made it a lot of. It was a great movie to shoot because you got, in a way, the best of both worlds. You got these incredible set pieces, big fight scenes, but you also got days where you're in a room with Nicole Kidman and just it's a dead quiet scene, two characters talking to each other for 4, 5, 6 pages, and it's a real treat when you can have both in the same movie. Obviously, from when I was very young, I had this fixation and a pull towards Viking culture and Norse mythology, and then I've basically lived half my life in the States, half my life in Sweden, grew up in Sweden, and then half my life in the States. And in those 20 years since I left Sweden, I've played a lot of really interesting characters. I've been very fortunate, but I don't think I've ever played a Scandinavian. I guess I did a show called True Blood, and on that one, my character had been in the States for 2 centuries, but was originally a Viking, also named Northman, by the way, in his last name. But I never. There was something about being away from Sweden that long, playing characters from around the world, mostly American characters, that kind of awakened that desire to go back to my roots in a way, and to play a Viking was something that I was desperate to do. So our story is based on Prince Amleth of Jutland by Saxo Grammaticus in the 12th century. So about 200 years after the end of the Viking era, the Viking Age, which was the predecessor of Hamlet. It's Shakespeare-based Hamlet on this character. Hence, he's a Danish prince, and the structure is basically young man, father murdered by uncle, marries his mother. That is in the Northman. Everything else is quite different. Hamlet is very much a man of inaction. Amleth is definitely not. He is very much a man of action. At least once he's set on the right path, when he found he realized what his fate was, and when Björk's character reminds him of who he is and what his purpose is, his mission, he vows to avenge the death of his father and save his mother. As a 10-year-old boy, when he watches the brutal murder of his father by his uncle, but when we're reconnected with him 20 years later, he works as a berserker on these Viking raids down the Russian rivers, which is basically the tip of the spear during the Viking invasion. They throw in these 10 to 15 berserkers to wreak havoc first, and almost like special forces. They go in and then they wreak havoc. They open the gates for the rest of basically the cavalry come in. We wanted to capture the essence of these people and give the audience an opportunity to see the world through the Viking world, through the eyes of these characters, and be as truthful to what that would look and feel and be like as humanly possible. I was very hopeful and optimistic that Rob would capture the essence, and Sean would capture the essence of that era and these characters, and to get that language right. Because we had years before played around with a couple of different ideas and with some screenwriters, but this was the first time when I first got the first draft of the Northman. I was so happy I cried. It had that, like the old Icelandic sagas, that dry, laconic tone. These incredible, succinct lines, just to the point. You don't really say more than necessary, and a lot of it is just said through looks. And it had all that, and the combination of almost like a play between these characters, but on a massive scale. It was important to show that side of the Viking culture, that there's so much more than just bearded men on long ships fighting each other. The spiritual aspect of it, the role the matriarchs had on the farm. They were in the conduit, connecting the people on the farm to the spiritual elements, and could communicate with the spirits. So it was important to find that and capture that and tell that story without obviously taking away what quite a big chunk of the audience will go to see the movie for, because they want to see the longships and they want to see people fighting. And they're definitely going to get that in the movie. There's a lot of that. But to show that there's a lot more to the culture than that. I just hope that it will register when people see the movie that there are no cuts in those scenes, and that will hopefully make it feel, even if you have no knowledge of filmmaking or how a film is being put together, that it's something visceral, that you feel that something just feels different when you watch it. King Aurvandil returns in the beginning of the movie. He returns home from an expedition. He's probably been gone for a winter, maybe 2 winters. And his young son eagerly awaits his father's return. And admires his father, looks up to his father, and he's the young prince of this kingdom on Rapse, which is an island in the North Atlantic, and is thrilled to be reunited with his father. But unfortunately, that doesn't last very long, because he gets murdered by his brother, Amleth's uncle, and Amleth has to witness this. He's in this berserker bubble and is just has no real drive. He doesn't really he doesn't really know what his fate is. He's forgotten about that until he is reminded. There's an encounter with a seeress, played by Björk, who has a spiritual connection, and she knows who he is and what his fate is, and reminds him of it. And because of that, the next morning, an opportunity arises to find Fjolnir, his uncle, and to save his mother. And that's how we kind of embark on the adventure, and it's him finding his uncle. Nicole was, it's who we wanted from day one. When we started talking about Gudrun, who would be the perfect Gudrun, it was always Nicole. I had just worked with her on Big Little Lies and had the most amazing experience with her. It was another very, very dark, complicated relationship, and she was just the perfect partner in that, in going to those dark places together. We approached Nicole about this, and we're obviously thrilled when she wanted to come on board. You see that in the movie, how Olga, Anya's character, and other characters, other women on the farm are being treated by the masters of the farm, but also to give them agency and strength, and make Anya's character Olga integral and important in getting off the island. That's her mission, and working together with Amleth, they can help each other out, and they need each other because she has that connection that he doesn't to the other side, to another realm. In the beginning, Olga is a distraction, but then he realizes that she has vowed to get off this island, and she has knowledge and a spiritual connection that he doesn't have, and the only way he can manifest his fate is through her, an alliance with Olga. Anya is incredible to work with, really, and it was important to. We don't have that many scenes, at least in the first half of the movie, so it was really important to kind of pack a punch in those scenes and to really feel that connection. I think it helps that we had a lot of fun together and we did enjoy spending time together, or I hope, at least I did. I hope Anya felt the same way. Again, we talked a lot about it because there are so few scenes in the beginning and the setup of this relationship. It was very important that for the audience to feel, oh, this is a strong connection, and he can't do this without her. CeCe Smith, our stunt coordinator, was phenomenal, and had to work really, really hard. It's very difficult to shoot a movie like this for anyone, let alone the stunt coordinator, because again, his hands were tied. It was one camera on film, no cuts, so everything had to be perfect. It was Fortunately, I got to work with Mark Slaughter, who was my stunt double on Tarzan, and Jack, who's also on Tarzan, and their team. So it was a bunch of stuntmen that we had a rapport. We knew each other. We worked very well together, and everyone. It was a challenge, but in a way, we all kind of thrived on that. Really loved that idea that it was so different and difficult to shoot it. There are very few moments where you can use a stunt double, again, because there are no cuts. So it's not like, well, let's do that with a stunt double, and then we cut back to me doing the landing. You know, it has to be all you. So it's about being prepared and making sure that you rehearse it enough times, and that obviously being warmed up, working with professional stunt guys that so those fights are safe for everyone. It was nice to get another Scandi in there, no, Claes is fantastic in the film. He's got a quiet intensity that I think is quite mesmerizing, and it's a wonderful role because it's so much more than just the antagonist. Shooting the feast in the beginning of the movie when King Arvandil, Ethan's character, and Fjolnir and other men return home with the riches from their expeditions, being entertained by the court jester played by Willem. It was wonderful because I was not in those scenes, and not to say that it wouldn't have been great to work with with Willem, but I actually I obviously came to set those days because Willem was going to be a court jester. But to be on set and to watch that, to stand next to camera and watch that, he's extraordinary, extraordinary. That and the whole the ritual with King Arvandil and young Amleth, led by Willem's character. It was just, it's so good. He's so phenomenal and absolutely perfect for that part. The plan was to be as accurate as possible, and just the amount of research that went into this was extraordinary. There would be conversations about, is this not the right century, but the right decade? Would this scene look like this? Well, this is more Eastern Sweden than Iceland this decade. Or what would this brooch look like? Would that be the right scene? Would that? It was, as an actor, a dream to step into that outfit, because you felt that the attention to detail and the passion behind it. And it was imperative to not try to make it look cool. I think you often you can take a lot of creative freedom. I'm all for that, and make your characters look cool, even if at the time they might have looked very different. We chose not to do that. We chose to try to be as accurate as possible. When we submitted to her, we were hopeful, and obviously Sean having those conversations with her. She doesn't act much anymore. So it was incredibly exciting when she said yes, and one of the highlights of the 6-month shoot was that one night I had on set with Björk. It was in a burnt down structure in the Slav village, and we shot it all night, and it was just an incredible experience. I recommend watching The Northman on a very, very big screen because it's a Robert Eggers movie. And what Robert and Jaron, our DP, if you've seen The Witch or The Lighthouse, they're both incredibly visual movies. And this is created by those two extraordinary filmmakers, but on a much, much larger scale, on a bigger scope. So I highly recommend watching this to be fully immersed in that world that Rob and Jaron created. It doesn't really do it justice on an iPad. I recommend watching it on a massive screen.
I got sent the script a little while ago, and I mean, I was already in because it was Robert. And when he told me that he'd written the character with me in mind, I was just so overwhelmed and humbled and just wanted to go on another adventure with him. And what an adventure it is. Olga was very interesting to me because I knew that I would be portraying an archetype, and the idea of how to be an archetype while still keeping it real and fresh and not going into stereotype. I think I was intrigued with how I could kind of play in that boundary. When we meet Olga, Olga is just hanging out in her village. She's having a good time, living a good life. She is a Slavic lady. But you don't get to see a lot of that. I think we're very quickly on the adventure, but something that I really love about her is her connection to the spiritual world and to nature. She really feels a sense of safety in her belief in fate. And that's a lovely confidence actually to have as a character, because you know that whatever's going on for her, she knows that it's what is meant to be. And that gives her a sense of ease, even when things are very difficult. One of the things that excites me most about this film is the long takes that we're getting to do, because that as a performer is so wonderful. You know, you're not getting stopped every 2 seconds. You get to actually be in the scene, be in the moment, and let it play all the way out. I think Amleth and Olga are drawn together by fate. I think she really believes that. I think when she was little, there was kind of this idea that she had to wait for her destiny to come to her, because she knew that there was going to be a destiny in that sense. And I think when she recognizes Amleth, she's still in her current situation, so she doesn't like him very much, and she finds it ridiculous that this man is willingly wanting to be a slave, willingly want to join in on this horror. But she can't help herself in helping him. It's a natural instinct that she has. In Amleth, she sees somebody with their own destiny. I think she's destiny, encouraged. It's like, it's almost as if she can see this tapestry being woven of the story that she has a part to play in. And when she meets Amleth, she goes, you're the other part of the story. Alex is so incredible to watch because he's a fantastic leader, like a truly fantastic leader. No matter how many times you make him wrestle the strongest man in the world, he's just still smiling and still has this energy about him. It's very inspiring to see. It's been so wonderful to work with Robert again. I feel so lucky that my first experience in filmmaking was with him, because I didn't actually realize how much of the way that I comport myself on set, the way that I approach my work, how much of that actually comes from him. It's only in coming back onto set and seeing the way he works that I'm like, oh, I get it from you. That's where I get these little things from. Yeah, he's just the best. I don't think I've been very lucky with the people that I work with, but because Rob and I have such an understanding of each other, we just go to really interesting places very quickly. It's one of my favorite experiences. The authenticity of the project is something that's very key to the way that Rob works, and it makes everything so much easier because, you put on your costume and then you walk into the world and you're there. Like, there's no imagination necessarily needed in order to get yourself to this place. I'm so happy to be working back in Northern Ireland. I did a movie here a couple of years ago and completely fell in love with the people and the scenery. I'm a big nature lover, so being on the side of a mountain overlooking incredible views and that being what you're looking at when someone's setting up the next shot, that's my happy place. So yeah, some truly extraordinary sights have been seen, but I'm not good at taking photographs, and I should be. I just want to drink it all in with my eyes. I know we've been so lucky. It really makes it magical. Oh, how would I describe the Northman? It's brutal. It's fantastical. It's epic. And it's really callously beautiful. Like, it's so beautiful, but raw. And, oh, yeah, it's a very visceral experience, I think.
Over the last 3, 4, 5 years, I've probably done a lot of movies that are sort of really found it in that very existentialistic, psychological thing that is like, I mean, that is quite common for a lot of movies, right? But this had that feel of something different in that sense. And then, yeah, I think that's sort of what attracted, because it was not so much, you know, the character itself, or it was more the thing that it was a chance to do something completely different. And work in a completely different way with not nearly as many lines as I've been used to. It's much more a physical thing. So yeah, that probably was the thing that I thought, okay, that's where this is going to be something else. Well, King Arundel is my brother, half brother. I'm sick of him. The first words that come out of my mouth when I sort of look up to his castle where he's sitting is proud ringed peacock. I think he's making too much of a fuss about everything. He should be, I mean, so I'm sick of him to a degree where I've decided to chop his head off. So, I mean, I probably couldn't be more sick of him. The Amleth story of the ancient Danish story that is like what this thing took inspiration for. I mean, I think what Robert has done with this, he's put it more in the category of a revenge story than Shakespeare's is, for instance. Shakespeare, he tries to sort of, in that one, it goes on inside Amleth, doesn't it? It's like he's trying to come to terms with the fact that his uncle has killed his father and is now with his mother. And he's solving it as a modern person, think you should, inside, within himself. And here, the revenge is lived. It's put into action. So that in that sense, it's a very different direction to the. I mean, I think in Shakespeare's play, he wants to call him. He puts on this play that's supposed to reveal, you know, all that. But here, no questions are asked. It's like, you know, your old Western movie where you shoot first and ask the questions after. So in that sense, revenge is at the core of this story, of this version of the Amleth myth. Oh my God, he's absolutely haunted by. I mean, the first thing we see with Fjolnir when we come into the later part of the story, the 2/3 of the story that are sort of set later on when Amleth is grown. We see him waking up. We see him waking up out of a dream, where his brother has said to him, "I'll see you in hell," and he's absolutely haunted by these things. And I suppose that's also something that I think is quite interesting, because these people are very, you know. Today, we would probably say that they are a bit primitive because they believe in all, that they're so superstitious. I mean, they do believe that if a curse has been called on them, it's going to go wrong. And they do believe that they can call a curse on someone and that person will be doomed. In this version of the story that Robert has written, it plays a very big part because they are very superstitious. They do believe in all this, this whole magical world of all these weird spirits, and they do believe that they can actually, you know, they feel that now it's starting to go wrong because Amleth is starting to kill people, and they believe that they can just make a sacrifice of someone and that'll just sort it. When I was approached for this, Alex was already on board, Nicole was on board, Anya was on board, Willem was on board. So when Robert called me and said if I would like to be part of this, I was like, wow, that is stellar company to come into. And it has been, I must say. Alex, for crying out loud, what a trooper. I mean, the stuff they have put him through on this, I mean, is like every other day I saw him, he just had another big fight where people chopped his head off and he sewed it back on or whatever. I mean, what they put him through is insane. And he's just been the most cheerful and lovely guy. And I mean, everybody's really been super, super lovely. Nicole has been like so sweet and friendly and lovely. Anya is so talented, you can't believe it. I've really enjoyed working with my two sons. It's just so different from working with a director that has been asked to do this script. Obviously, the director has said, yes, that's a great script. I'd love to take responsibility for that. But it's just much closer to home and the heart when your director has written the script itself. It becomes important at a different level. And that urgency, that is also present here. And I really think that gives an enormous energy to the whole thing. With these one takes, it's everybody that need to, I mean, be on their toes and perform to 100% all the time. And it just brings it together and has, it just becomes important in a different way. I mean, it's as if you sort of come together in telling the story in a different way. I really like that. Even if sometimes you're like, oh, can we please not make it so difficult for ourselves? Just do a little bit of coverage here, a little bit of coverage here, and just edit together and just go home. But at the end of the day, I would say that it's just a pleasure because it just takes it from, you know, the stakes are just higher and you can feel that. People are nerdy and geeky about this. They want their details right. And I think Robert it's not just being nerdy and geeky about it. I think he sort of knows that it brings a quality to it. It brings quite tactile thing to, as I said before, just 2 days before we started shooting, I was brought out to set for one of the villages that we're in for the first time. And I arrived there and knowing what I was wearing and knowing that that everything out there, it could be turned into a museum now. Is that accurate? I mean, if they want to leave those houses out there, it could be sort of a museum of what a village looked like back then. That's how accurate it's done. And I remember thinking, you know, that thing where I sort of thought, no need to play a Viking here. I'm in the clothes and this is the setting and I can just concentrate on the embodiment of this guy. Because everything else is here, I mean, made for me by people that have done my hair, done my costume, and so much effort has gone into all these little details of the sets, the costumes, the hair, beards, everything. I always hope this with everything I do, that it's been worth the effort and all the work that's been put into it will be. I just really like to tell great stories. And I don't actually really care if they're set in the Viking Age or now or in 1945 or whenever. I mean, so I hope that this is something that will move people and that will reach out to them and they can see or find themselves in, or that will have something. I hope that they will go and see any movie that I do and leave the theatre, you know, having had a bit of fun or being a bit, having a bit of something to think about or having been touched or moved, or I hope it does all that.
The thing that's really striking about it from the get-go is the language. Most films don't aspire to a sense of originality in their language. You know, it's something in the theater you see a lot, no matter virtually any playwright worth their salt has kind of their own use of language and playfulness of character and world building. But for convenience and for audiences and for mass appeal, in general, cinema has a very, what they call naturalistic hit on language, which is just try to make it as easy as possible to be digested by as many different people as possible. And what you lose then is a sense of specificity or character or originality. And so there's a poetry to the language of this. It almost feels like Beowulf or something. I remember that's what I thought when I read this. Oh, this aspires to be a kind of grand poem about a Viking king. You know, it was really beautiful. The story is, you know, pretty simple. The kind of classic son losing a father and trying to make sense of the universe and finding his place in the context of the world without a father, without a role model, without a mentor. And that's a kind of very old story. It's even older than Hamlet. And so my character in a lot of ways is a symbol of fatherhood and a symbol of something lost. I had a sense that I would like for him to be kind of the way the younger generation often sees the older generation as having more integrity and having faced a harder world, and admiring them for that. But I don't know, it's difficult to, one of the beautiful things about this movie is a sense of mystery. You know, that's what poetry can achieve that most television or magazine articles or, you know, they sometimes say too much, and in saying too much, you limit things. And what's beautiful about this is just the mystery of it. I find him incredibly interesting character. My character thinks so well of himself that he can't imagine other people don't love him. You know, I don't think he could ever imagine that his wife would be unfaithful or that his brother would be jealous or envious of him. I think he's so confident in his position and his worldview that he's completely blindsided by this betrayal. And you could see that level of ego as narcissism, or you could see it as a projection of his own goodwill. I don't know what it is, but I find it extremely interesting. Something I find incredibly beautiful about what this script does, which is imagine that the jester is also a spiritual counselor. There's great wisdom in that, you know, I've probably learned more from comedians in my life than I had from any kind of guru, you know, that whether it's, you know, George Carlin or Chris Rock or Richard Pryor, or, you know, some of the greatest thinkers of the modern era have been comedians. So I love this notion that the court jester is his spiritual counselor. You know, that's very wise. And so that's an exciting relationship to me. Also, we get to basically do acid together, which, you know, something I've never done on screen. It's very exciting to drink peyote with Willem Dafoe and get naked and howl like a wolf. All the best directors I've ever worked with lead by example, meaning that they're so immersed in the world that it's contagious. You know, Robert gave me a ton of books and literature and videos to watch about Vikings and played Viking music. And I have a small part in this movie. But his passion for every detail makes you realize that somebody cares. Somebody cares whether it's done right or done wrong. You know, a lot of times you get a sense that people don't care, people aren't going to notice. And, You know, that's the thing about Kazan, they used to say about a lot of Kazan, he just noticed everything. He noticed everything. And that's why the work is so good, is it's each detail in and of itself doesn't matter, but 1,000 details has a gravitational pull towards excellence. And Robert has that. Here's the thing about Alex is that, I mean, he's given Schwarzenegger a run for his money. I mean, he looks better than Conan. I mean, I don't know how the hell he did it, but to have somebody, he's an incredibly talented young man, and he comes from a family of great actors, and he has such a relaxed demeanor about performance. It's just wonderful to be around, and to see him dedicated to fulfilling this kind of vision. He's almost made a sculpture of his body, you know? I mean, it's like Michelangelo or something out there. And I know how hard that is. I've had a few roles in my life where that was asked of me, and it's just incredible mental discipline. You know, if you're supposed to look like an athlete, you have to live like an athlete. You know, it's not a costume you can put on. And so that's very painful, and it takes incredible mental discipline and dedication. And he's done it with a smile on his face. Rob's sense of clarity about the movie he sees in his head is very helpful. And kind of, as I'm a student in the Willem Dafoe School of Acting, it becomes very easy. Once there's a path where you know the stage is, this is where the stage is, this is where the light is, this is where your performance goes, everything becomes very simple. It's so easy to do a good job as an actor in this movie because the world is so real. When the world is not real, the actor has to expend a tremendous amount of energy to distract you from all these fake costumes and fake sets and bad photography. And when the photography is excellent, and the costumes are excellent, and the production design is excellent, well, then the actor disappears. It's all happening by itself. It's really wonderful.
Robert Eggers is someone that when I saw his first feature, The Witch, I reached out to him because I wanted to work with the guy. And then I was lucky enough to work with him on his next feature, The Lighthouse, and it was a very good experience. I really enjoyed working with him. Because of his detail, because he makes a personal cinema, he does a cinema that uses cinema language. Very little coverage, very designed shots, working with Jaron Blaschke as DP. They work very closely. It's a combination of being very well designed and very well realized, but also he's an actor. He was an actor. He speaks an actor's language. So I love working with him because he works with a great kind of back and forth in the scenes and gives me lots of details and lots of challenges. And I feel always very engaged with when I'm with him. But I think most importantly, he's a guy of the cinema, but he's also a student of history, and he loves history so deeply, you feel it, that it's infectious, and you get drawn into those worlds with him, and as an actor, you just want to help him realize them as you can in your role. I like returning to work with directors whose work I like to be a part of and that I like working with. And he's way up there. So he just contacted me and said, look, this film is about Vikings, you know, big, tall Norse guys, you know, with shoulders like this and you know, 40 years old max, you know. But I have something for you to do in this. So that was kind of good. He wrote this, I understand. Directors say this sometimes, but I think he did invent this character for me. And it's a beautiful character because even though it's less expansive and I'm very much part of the ensemble in this movie, it's a very interesting role because it's very multidimensional. And what I do have to do in the story is very pivotal and also very essential. I mean, there's no fat in this role. So it's very nice for that reason. He is the fool to the king. He's like a jester. But he also, and this isn't apparent immediately, he's a sort of a shaman. He's a priest of sorts. And he conducts a very important ritual in the story. So I would say he's an ally, and he's a friend of the king, Arvendir, played by Ethan Hawke. Robert kind of told me what he needed, and I think he tapped into certain things he'd seen as far as my energy and my sense of humor and my love to do physical things, and I think he really set me up to do those things. So preparation, I get sucked into his research. You know, he says, listen, what do you want me to send you? And I'm like, bring it on, and I'll cherry pick. I'll see what's useful to me. And in fact, I got very sucked into it because this was a time in history and a culture that I didn't know a lot about. So while really maybe it wasn't necessary to go in great depth, it was a pleasure because I learned something, and I started to understand his attachment to it and his love for it. And you get sucked in. And then when you arrive and you see these sets that are made with such detail and such care, it helps with the pretending. If acting on some level is really pretending, everything's there. You enter that world and you fold into that world. It's a big, muscular film, you know, much, much bigger than The Lighthouse. He still is approaching it with the same kind of detail and the same kind of care. And while I may sound Pollyanna, at this point, the producers are fantastic because they're supporting him in that approach. And a lot of that has to do with not just detail in the set, but these beautiful shots that are very designed, that play as one and have inside each shot has a rhythm and a story and a dynamic that's beautiful on its own. And he doesn't cover things. He doesn't protect himself and make the film in the editing room, although he's got a great editor in Louise Ford, who he's worked with 2 times before. You know, there's always challenges to editing, but he doesn't have all standard coverage. So there's a kind of concentration and a kind of engagement that's really all in when you are a performer in these shots. There's a precision and there's a demand on you to be really concentrated, and you're never outside of it because you have to concentrate so hard, be involved so hard, and be absorbed into the world to make the shot work. It's the same guy, but he's got like a double life. And this ritual that he does, you know, as a priest to this Loki figure, is secret. It's something sacred. It's something that's only reserved for the king and his son. Robert's like a scholar in his approach to this stuff because he loves it. And of course, it's a preparation. So it's basically reading about the different figures, the customs, some historical facts, what their movements were. And whether that's important in order to play these roles, I don't know, but I enjoy it. And it gives an authority to the pretending that you wouldn't have if you didn't have an imagination or a taste or some information about that world. Because I feel like every time you learn something, it kind of expands your imagination or how you imagine a world could be, and it helps you not limit what you think is possible in the scene or in the movie. They built a town there on this cliff, basically. Very beautiful, this cliff was made for cinema, or cinema was made for this cliff, I don't know. But they built this very authentic, very beautiful town, and all the bells and whistles. I arrived and I realized what a large production this is, how muscular, how detailed, how strong it is. There were sheep, there were slaves, there were townspeople, there was lots going on. And given the fact that Robert has these beautiful designed shots, it's a lot to wrestle with. So, but he's up to the challenge. But I think it's going to be spectacular. Spectacular movie. A lot of my stuff is interior and fairly intimate, but some of the action sequences with the boats and with battles is going to be incredible. The film language that's being used and the precision and the passion that Robert and Jaron and the whole team has, this way of shooting a lot of big action sequences without a lot of cutting away. You really experience it. You aren't numbed just by noise and by fast cutting. These shots are designed. There's a beauty to it. I think it's special for that. From what I've seen and what we've been shooting, it really taps into what you can only do in a movie. You want them to have an experience, to enter into this world, to consider another way of being, to consider another time, to consider themselves in that other time. Of course, there's a story, a very complicated story on one level and a very simple story on another level. But I think what's going to be really exciting is to see a world that they haven't seen before. And I suppose everybody says that when they make a film because they're very, precious about their little world. But I think the amount of research and the amount of support in what Robert's doing is really impressive.
Well, I've been a huge fan of Robert's for many years, since The Witch, and I knew that this film was happening, and then all of a sudden, my agent sent me an email with some sides, and I was like, "Whoa! This is a Robert Eggers movie, and I really want to get this right." So just started prepping, and I found some old fur in my flat that I put on, and I tried to look like a Viking as best as I could, and so I put myself on tape and I sent it away, and then like a couple of days later I had this Zoom call with Robert, and then I got to read the script, and it's just amazing, and of course I was immediately on board. I would do anything on a Robert Eggers film. I would do anything on one of his films, and getting to play like one of the characters, it's a dream. Thor is the eldest son of Fjolnir and Amleth's cousin, and when we meet him in the film, he's been given this task to travel to Norway and meet the king and become a slave trader, and it's a very honorable task for him. And I think he has this very youthful and impulsive side to him, like an underlying rage and frustration to prove himself, and I think that's very interesting to getting to portray this young man in this time in history. I've had so much fun like developing this character in collaborating with Robert on creating this character, because we've had quite a lot of conversations about like how Thor might be the only Viking in this movie who gets to have a little bit of like "you can't sit with us" attitude, and Thor always shows up to the party with the most extravagant outfits and with a lot of jewelry and hats and so on, and it's been so much fun. He has a lot of respect for his father, Fjolnir, but he still feels that Fjolnir always like keeps watch over him and makes sure that he doesn't blow the opportunities he's being given, and there's always this thing about like how everybody knows that his father killed his brother and took his wife and then lost his kingdom to the Norwegian king, and they had to move to this little farm. So I think there's an element of like feeling a little bit protective of the family and the family's honor in a sense. The mere presence of Amleth thing, I think that's a huge element of irritation for Thor. I mean, me as a guy, I'm not as like just like physically the appearance of Amleth. I think he's just like a walking reminder to Thor, like how he's not the perfect Viking and how he's not like perfectly suitable for the task that's lies before him. And of course, Amleth is just a slave to Thor, and he's using him as like a chess piece in his that's his turf, and Amleth is like might be a valuable asset for him. And but I think he, as the story evolves and unfolds, he starts seeing potential in Amleth and an opportunity for him to take advantage of him, I think. I've always been very physical, and I've done a lot of like boxing and martial arts and Thai boxing and so on, and that proved to be very useful in the prep for my. I mean, I have this sort of sequence with where Thor fights his best friends and practicing for future fights. But just the footwork of it and just prepping for that was so much fun, and just it was just so much fun. And Cece, our lovely stunt coordinator, is such a lovely man and a patient master who guided us all through it, and it was a blast. And just like that being said, it's just like getting to wield a sword and scream with rage and having a shield and all of those things. It's just. It's a dream come true. I wouldn't lie to say anything else. Rob sent me this his Dropbox just filled with texts and poems. Sean's poems, who wrote the script with Robert, and podcasts and music, and of course also lectures by this lovely, very charismatic archaeologist, English archaeologist Neil Price, who also wrote this amazing book called Children of Ash and Elm that I also read, and that was really great to just like, I mean, there's a lot that I don't really have that's not really useful from my perspective as like portraying this character, but just like getting grounded in the material and just like diving into this world and learning about the everyday life of these people who lived in this time. I knew Alex a little bit from before. We have met a couple of times in bars and restaurants and so on in Stockholm, since he's also Swedish. But just like getting to work with him on this movie has been. It's just been so great to watch him. He's such a great leading man, and he always shows up with this big smile on his face, and he's setting this great vibe on set and working so hard. I mean, the physical challenge of portraying the character that he does must be just overwhelmingly hard, and he does it with such grace and with. Yeah, as I said, he always shows up with this huge smile, and yeah, he's a great leader. I think, great guy. Nicole Kidman she's royalty. She's like one of the biggest names in the industry, and rightfully so. She is just amazing. I don't know how many films I've seen with her, and she's always been one of my favorites. And just to be on the same call sheet as her is sort of hard to wrap your head around, I think. Claes is just fantastic. He has this very, very intense presence and such a great charisma, and he's been so generous with me, and like and we've really been able to like establish this father and son relationship and find what that is between these characters that's special for them. And it's been great. He's fantastic. I love working with him. I'm proud to be his on-screen son. Working with Robert that's just been amazing. He's a true artist and a visionary, and I think he's one of the most interesting directors working today, actually. And he is so incredibly kind and funny and humble, and he creates this space for me as an actor where I feel that I can just try things and fail and be bad, and also he's very much an actor's director, and he's also just a joy to be around. I mean, just the level of detail on the costumes and in all the environments and the sets it gives you so much in terms of like piecing your performance together, because it's especially in a period piece like this, it gives you so much, just getting into the costume of Thor and getting the rings on and the hair and the beard and all. And they're stepping onto set, and you're actually like, between action and cut, you're actually like living the life of these people, of these Vikings. It's really a blessing to getting to do that. You haven't seen an epic revenge story until you've seen it through the eyes of Robert Eggers. That's sort of what I would say to people, and I'm very thrilled for people to see this beautiful and violent and poetic painting that Robert is painting. It's gonna be something that the world has never seen before, I think.
I immediately knew that it should be a revenge story, partially because that's just most of these Viking stories are revenge stories, but a good revenge movie works. And I felt that if I could find a really simple, mythic, clear tale that this audience could relate to and understand, then I could indulge in the material world and the inner and religious and mythological world more than if the story was complex. And so really quickly, I discovered the story of Amleth that was written by the Danish historian Saxo Grammaticus. And Amleth was the source material for Shakespeare's Hamlet, also known as The Lion King. And so when I had this story, uncle kills dad, steals mom, son goes on revenge. Everybody knows this. This just works. So that was really exciting. My biggest misconception about Vikings was just that they were, big, stupid, raping, pillaging, and look, the Vikings did a lot of terrible stuff. Like they're, and I don't shy away from that in the film. But what got me fascinated was the rich mythology and poetry. As I learned more, even their wood carvings and visual artistic expression was also very inspiring. But I think when you're dealing with these pagans, they're the pagan in the period in our film, who every part of life is an expression of belief, and belief is an expression of every part of life. There is so much beauty in the way that they saw the world. I try to present this mindset, the Viking mind, whatever that is, without judgment. This is their beliefs. It's not my beliefs. It's not your beliefs. This is their beliefs. But even then, in not trying to romanticize their beliefs, I think with the revenge motif, as an audience member, part of you just wants him to get revenge because that's the way these kinds of stories work. But you do ask questions, hopefully, if I've done my job, who's right and who's wrong? And that's one of the cool things about the sagas is they also, as far as the protagonists and the antagonists, there is often gray area there. they are full characters. And so I hope that, even in telling this story about a culture who says you must revenge and you're going to be shamed and criticized and everyone's going to hate you and you're a failure if you don't revenge, that we can still wonder if that's the right thing to do. I was incredibly fortunate that Sjón, the Icelandic novelist and poet, wanted to work with me. I mean, I don't use this word lightly. He's a genius, not to say that this thing we created together is genius, but he is one. And his understanding of this mythology and culture is just very rich to begin with, even though we did a lot of research. But it was one of the most fun collaborations I've ever had in my life. He has a wonderful sense of humor, and he's also just so incredibly fast. If I have one small idea, he'll then send like 10 ideas like based on that immediately. But basically, I wrote a treatment. I went to Iceland. We enriched that together. He wrote a longer treatment, which I gave him notes on. He wrote a longer one. I gave him notes on that. Then he wrote a draft. I gave him notes. And then he wrote another draft, and then I revised that. And then we revised together. Early on, the first the first treatment that I sent Alex, they went. It began in Denmark, and then as a Viking raider, as a berserker, Ulfhethnar, he went to Scotland. And Alex said, "Oh, we've seen like raiding on the British Isles a lot. Like, why don't they go to the land of Rus or modern day Ukraine?" And you didn't have to force me. I love Ukrainian folk culture, so I was incredibly happy that he suggested that. And it changed. Olga became Olga. The seeress became what she. All this stuff. So it was very. That was a great addition early on. Amleth is an interesting character in Saxo Grammaticus because he's someone who is playing a fool, which is what Shakespeare really takes advantage of, is someone who's pretending to be mad, which is not what we're doing here. He plays sort of a dullard when he's disguised as an enslaved person on the farm. But I think what we wanted to make Amleth feel like a protagonist in these Icelandic family sagas, who are these kind of anti-heroes. They're often outlaws. We were looking at Native American dances where people kind of transform into bears and wolves, and also war dances from like Polynesia and Africa, and then tried to understand how, there's a few images that we think are Germanic war dances that exist from actually mostly a little before the Viking Age. And so we tried to, how can that influence this static image of a guy holding two spears? And so we worked with our team of core berserkers on this. But and I think it was really one of the most satisfying things and helpful things for Alex was that berserker transformation. Alex has said that he was glad that we didn't do it right away because he had a few weeks to get to know me and Jared and how we worked better. But after we did that scene where he really just completely lets go and does something I haven't seen him do on screen before, he was just Amleth the rest of the shoot. Like every take is a usable take. He was just, in it. And I think, how can that not be cathartic for you as a person to perform that? I purposefully cast Arthur Novak as young Amleth, who really does look quite a bit like Alex when he was 11 or 12, but also he's a sensitive child, and he seems gentle. So in the initiation ceremony, when he has to now like become a man, it hopefully seems quite intense because he seems not ready. to be a man. And then he's thrust into this situation. And then to see through his uncle's acts how he has become this beast that is Alex with shoulders up to here, that initiation ritual is a step in that direction. It was lucky for me that the handsomest, famousest, biggest, Nordic actor wanted to do a Viking movie. There's nobody else who could play this role except for Alex, with the kind of complete dedication and believability that Alex brings it. It's just there's nobody else. And I mean, I gotta tell you, in the last act, he feels like he feels like a saga character, just like a true Viking hero, anti-hero, like off the page. And it's incredibly satisfying for me to watch. I don't do anything that I am not insanely passionate about because there's just not time in life for it. And it's so hard to make a film anyway. And the approach of trying to do something historically accurate, the great thing for me about it is that everybody knows what we're after. Everybody knows what we're after. We know that we're after this thing. So it aligns everybody. And we also, because we had the Viking historians working with us, like Neil Price and Johanna Katrin Friedrichsdotter, and we also had a lot of people who were working on the film, creating wardrobe and creating props and things, who were part of the living history and experimental archaeology community, who become Vikings on the weekend. So you have a lot of people who have passion invested in figuring this stuff out. And so that makes the other people around them more passionate, And then all of a sudden, you have core background playing enslaved people coming up to me with something that they read, and so everyone gets passionate about the goal. CC Smith was the stunt coordinator, and it shouldn't have been a surprise to me, but I realized quite early on in prep, he's another authorial voice in this movie. I mean, when you're doing an action movie, that person is a major collaborator in telling this story. And CC was, he's very experienced. Also, his expertise kind of comes in sword fighting. That's what he loves. And I shared with him a bunch of YouTube videos of this, of people who hypothetically think they know how Vikings fought based on, why is the crossguard so small on their sword? People must have realized a bigger crossguard would give more hand protection. But then this guy's kind of arguing because the size of the shield, there's a reason, whatever. But we looked at that kind of stuff to think about how can we create some fighting styles that are new. So Jaron, my DP, and I, we would go and watch CC rehearse these scenes with his guys. And then Jaron would be with an iPhone trying to figure out the camera placement. And so we were having to work together in working in this fashion where there's all these long takes. How can we work? Again, the whole thing becomes a machine. It becomes a big dance when you're working in this way. So we were constantly, constantly improving to make it more holistic. Tommy Dunn made our weapons, and so Craig, the production designer, Linda Muir, the costume designer, they know how I work, and everyone else didn't. And this idea that don't look at pictures of Viking swords and then design a cool one with a dragon on it. Just make me that sword, or make me that sword hilt with that blade, maybe that pommel, but that's it. It's just do the research. And it was actually hard for people to wrap their minds around at first. Everyone got there and everyone enjoyed it. But Tommy was the first new person who was like, you want me to make museum replicas? Got it. and he made, I mean, really incredibly beautiful things. How do we create something simple that's based on the research entirely, that also feels like something that came out of a post-tribal civilization and just feels grounded? And how do you make basically wool tunics, and that's just about it, like cool, without trying to make them cool? I mean, part of it is the actor's attitude, and luckily, Alex Skarsgård and Anya Taylor-Joy, they can make a potato sack look great, But it was challenging. And the other thing that was also challenging, and this was true with all of the material culture, is that to a modern eye, if you traveled from Iceland to Russia, people dress more alike than you'd expect. People dress more alike than you'd expect because also, the people are trading and raiding, and so all this stuff's getting passed. There are certainly very different things, but we had to focus on the differences in order so that when we go to the land of the Rus and we're with this Slavic village, you understand, like, this is a community that dressed very differently from where Amleth grew up. King Orvindil Warraven is played by Ethan Hawke, and he is a handsome, proud Norse king of a petty kingdom north of Scotland called Hrafnsey, or Hrapsey, as Icelanders would pronounce it, which is insane. And it means Raven's Island. None of that's in the movie to that specificity, but so you know. And then Gudrun, Queen Gudrun, is played by Nicole Kidman, and she has some secrets that shall not be told on this EPK. Nicole was great, and I'm not. This is only my third film, but I've been doing it long enough that I don't tend to get intimidated by actors. And certainly on set, we had a great relationship. But the first time I was going to meet her, I was a little bit like, I'm going to meet Nicole Kidman. And so we sat down at this Italian restaurant in Nashville, and we were kind of talking like, how was your flight? Blah, blah, blah. And then after 90 seconds, she was like, just so you know, I'm going to do the movie. and then we talked a little bit, and she said, this script has teeth. I don't read scripts that have teeth, which was cool. But she also gave me a lot of notes about her character that were incredibly good. To make the character much more rich and nuanced. Clearly, is an accomplished Viking swordsman. He has a little bit of a Viking Richard III about him, which Claes does really well. And I think that him always feeling like, am I as good or better than my brother? I should be better, but am I actually better? But I'm going to kill him. But I killed him. And I think even though he is scary and formidable, that tension and that subtlety makes Fjolnir very interesting. And also, this is something that Alex and Shion and I wanted from the beginning, was also that Fjolnir is more nuanced. I love Willem, Willem's one of the greatest actors who's ever lived, in my humble opinion, but I think that, it should, I would submit that as a fact. And I'm lucky that he likes to work with me. And I think it was great because we'd already worked together on The Lighthouse, he knew what Jaren and I were up to. Anya Taylor-Joy plays Olga of the Birch Forest, who is a Slavic woman and a white witch who is enslaved by the Viking mercenaries that Amleth, for a time, is employed by. And he sneaks aboard the slave ship that's bringing Olga and some other enslaved Slavic people to Iceland. And I think, he's intrigued by her powers, and she must wonder, what in the hell is this Viking doing on here, on this slave boat? Like, there's something going on. And I think that then they realize that they can help each other get off this island, and that's which is what she wants. But Alex has some things he needs to get done first, of course. Anya, aside from being, a perfectionist in her work and an incredible actress, who's able to express really deep subtext with a simple line. She's also super professional, and she a lot of times was almost a background character in some of these scenes, like where and a lot of actresses might have asked to use a double, but she was there with her shoes off in the mud in the freezing cold, and being again a leader for everyone to respect and say, like, this is how you conduct yourself on a set. I asked my friend Robin Carolyn, who is the composer along with Seb Gainsborough. Robin had collaborated with Björk a lot, and so he'd been to Iceland a lot, and he's also half Icelandic. So I asked Robin, what should we do while we're here? And he gave us touristy things to do and some not so touristy things to do. And he said, you should hang out with Björk. And I was kind of, I said, please, it's fine. Like, no, that's okay. You don't need to. Anyway. And then Björk texts me suddenly saying, please come over to my house for dinner. I'm making salmon and I'm inviting my friend Shion and his wife Ausa. I think you guys would really get along with them. And I said, to myself, I don't even know you. Like, why do you think I'm going to get along with your friend Shion? So Björk hosted this lovely dinner, and her daughter Doa was also there, who is also in the film, but she was like 12 or 13 at the time, something like that. And then Shion and I started talking about early modern witchcraft. We hit it off. So Björk, in many ways, and Robin like engendered this movie. Björk did have input on her costume. It was mostly my design and Linda's design, and it is, I will admit, like one of the more speculative costumes. Her sort of dress and the profusion of jewelry is likely quite accurate. The headpiece is a more ancient version of something that is based on Ukrainian bridal headpieces that are more from like the end of the early modern period into like the 19th to 20th century. But we tried to create a more ancient version of that, and it's, as if as a seeress, she's wedded to the gods. And then the temporal rings on her headdress are again accurate. But then Björk wanted a third eye, and she also wanted her eyes to be concealed. And so there are, if you'll notice that the women wear cowrie shell headbands in this particular village, which is based on the kind of headgear from this Ukrainian tribe who are called Severians. They didn't call themselves that. We don't know what they called themselves, but that's how we refer to them. But I think, like, given where some cowrie shells are in certain burial sites, we felt we could justify lowering them to be here, and that was something from Björk, and I think the third eye is really cool. Robin and Seb sort of worked with a Danish guy named Paul Huxbro, who's a musicologist who specializes in what actual Viking Age music might have sounded like, which we hear in the diegetic cues in the movie, and they tend to be a little bit more like hey nani nani and like medieval than we think of like Viking stuff. But through their exploration of the real stuff and like Nordic melodies and exploring what the capabilities of the ancient instruments, and then being inspired by like the better stuff of this neo-folk, they've created a really cool, like muscular soundtrack that I am really proud of. Ingvar is the Laurence Olivier of Iceland, and he's like fairly unknown here, but I mean, he plays the third seer, and he has to go toe to toe charisma with Dafoe and Björk, and he totally succeeds. I mean, like that. I love him in that scene, and also he tends to play sort of depressed Icelandic policeman in Nordic noirs. So this is like the complete opposite of the kind of roles that he usually plays. And additionally, he like they're because of someone who traveled to Hebede in the Viking Age and talked about Viking singing coming from their throats and sounding like the growling of dogs. There's the hypothesis that throat singing was part of like Viking singing culture. And Ingvar taught himself to throat sing for the role, which is also really cool. The thing that made me want to make a Viking movie was the Icelandic landscapes, the awe of these landscapes that feel before time and without time, because they're just so epic. And you felt like, when I felt like, silly as it is, like when I didn't even know anything about them, like the Norse gods have got to be here, man. Like they've got to be here. And so when you are telling a mythic tale like this, like you want to have these mythic landscapes to set it in. The Northman is a story that everyone can relate to and be familiar with. It is like, the story of a son seeking his father's vengeance. It's a story about family dynamics. It's a story about love, and it's an exciting adventure movie. I think that we think we know Viking stories, and we think we know these kinds of epics like this, and to a certain degree we do. I'm making a movie for a broad audience in a way that I never have before. It really is intended to be something that like everyone can enjoy and eat their popcorn to. There are set piece action sequences, which is something that I've never done before. But also, because it's character driven, hopefully you walk away thinking about the movie, and as much as you also were literally entertained. I must say that even I, in the age of COVID, have been able to watch things at home in a way that I've found more comfortable doing. And as a filmmaker, I've tried so hard my professional life and before that, just as a movie lover, to always see stuff in the theaters. And I know it's hard. It's hard. But this is a movie you have to see in theaters. Dune was something that I was not going to see like on HBO Max. And this is it's literally an epic. It's literally an epic. We have these these Icelandic landscapes and these battle sequences, and you need to be transported. You need to be transported to the 10th century. You need to be transported to the Viking Age. And it's not only for the visuals, but the sound, to really be in a movie theater and experience the waves crashing against the boat and the storm at sea. And, without that, you cannot fully experience what this movie is.